Hey there, everybody. Thank you for joining us for a special episode of The Boardroom. I'm John, the John Carter. Today, I'm going to be speaking to Viva LaCoin. He is a very powerful member of crypto Twitter, also Omens. He's also a thought leader, as well as has very strong opinions on macroeconomics, a very good, interesting perspective on what's going on in crypto, very prominent character inside of Omen. We're excited to talk to him today. It's going to be an amazing interview, and I hope that you all get a lot of information from the conversation. One thing I will say is that we had some issues with signal, but the sound is perfect. So thank you guys for tuning in. I'm excited for you all to see what we got going on.
Should I finish that thought, or are you
Yeah.
going
Finish
into
that
the
thought. You're good.
it would be cool if there is an aggregator to pull together not just what a collection minted for, but I want to know if someone's either listing an NFT or if there's a rare NFT that I want. Instead of just putting an offer in or needing to dig up, what did they pay for it? How many times has it been sold? You can see what that asset was last purchased or traded for. And then I know, let's say if it's a multitude of X's above what it was last purchased for, then I might be able to even lower that offer a bit because they're already so far in profit. It might entice them enough to move in a low liquidity market. Or if they paid significantly more for it, they might be less inclined to accept a lower offer because they're trying to recoup whatever they have it listed for. Like that's just an idea that popped up when you were mentioning that.
Yeah, stuff like that is what we're hoping for. Like, we want the community feedback to actually drive the development of it, like
Yeah.
adding features as we go. But actually, something that nobody actually knows yet, and I'm sharing this with you, so I might have to clip this out, perhaps.
No. Wait.
Super big. That was like, this is brand new. Okay, so let's actually. So you don't want to talk about yourself at all, like personally. Like, can I ask, like, what was your life in? What thing? Like, what's your background? What were you doing before crypto? Like, before you even heard of crypto, tell me about like where you came from a little bit, and like up to now, right? Up until the discovery of crypto, and then like typically after you've taken the pill, you can't like unsee behind the curtain. I feel like.
Absolutely. So I'll give a consolidated background of what led me into this market. But for myself, I've never been super well off as an individual. I moved out when I was young, never had a ton of money, didn't necessarily understand it. And I was not really big into education when I was in my teens and going into around like 1920. I didn't know at the time, but I have severe ADHD amongst other things, and it just was never my learning style. And I tended to push it away. It didn't make sense to me. But I went back to college. I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I went to community college because I didn't have a lot of money. I wanted to go without being in a lot of debt. And I inevitably, and I'm going to shut this window because it's raining.
No, you're good.
I inevitably got into university. And the first thing I was going to do was be a professional strength and conditioning coach. Because when I was young, I had really bad eating habits. There was no education around nutrition or anything. And I was bigger when I was in seventh grade than I am now, weight wise. So I was a very heavy kid. And in learning all that stuff, just losing that weight coming out of high school, I learned a lot of the food that we consume, a lot of the health products that are geared to, after the fact, retroactively impact us. Like a lot of it is just poison and garbage. And I'm like, how is any of this allowed into this, system? Who's approving this stuff? All these different synthetic things that we're consuming. So I was already jaded against a lot of the big regulatory boards and everything else. But I wanted to go into a field where I was able to help people on that front, either get strong, stay in shape, learn about nutrition. My brother wound up moving into becoming a physical therapist. But I worked in professional strength and conditioning for a bit, and I wound up with a pretty significant injury, and I fractured a couple vertebrae in my back. And at that point, it's such a hands-on job where you're demonstrating like Olympic lifting and doing these different things. It just couldn't connect anymore. And I was just putting myself through the ringer. So I wanted to go back to school for something else. And I wound up going back for my MBA, which thankfully I got a scholarship for. So I was able to avoid a lot of that debt and turn around a lot of my disinterest in traditional education. But while going through that MBA and starting to eke my way into the corporate world, I learned that a lot of it was depicting a financial system, a business system, a system of accountability that didn't really exist. And any of the companies or corporations I went to work for not only didn't follow any of those rules or principles, but a lot of the reporting, a lot of the data was always skewed to be beneficial to the entity. It always took advantage of the clients, the customers, the people that were beholden to their ethical delivery of a product or service. And it never seemed to stop. So around 2016, I was working in payroll, and I came across cryptocurrency, and all of my frustration with accountability within these systems, the lack of true regulatory presence to do what everyone claims they want to do, like protect the consumer, protect the health, protect the financial well-being. There was finally a system that was doing that and was fully ran by the people in this distributed ledger system. And it hit me like a ton of bricks that this inevitably was where we were going to wind up almost a decade later at this point. I've been in crypto for a little over 8 years. But at the time, everyone's like, you're an insane person. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Cryptocurrency is just a giant digital Ponzi scheme, and so on and so forth. But around 2020, when all of this stuff started really ramping up, because our timeline of either the amount of debt that we have as a nation, the interest that we pay, the speed at which we print or issue that debt, and the impact it has on the population was sped up when we printed like $10 trillion out of thin air when we shut the world down in 2020. So I'm looking at my timeline, and I had to condense down from the original timeline that I had and say, okay, we probably have about 4 or 5 years to focus on positioning. And then the next 4 years or so is going to be the outcome or the result or the consequences of everything we're currently doing. And when I made Viva La Coin, I didn't necessarily want to be involved on this level at first. Now, it was important to me, and I would talk about it to my coworkers, to my friends, to my family. But early in 2020, even in 2019, there started to be something that I didn't see when I first started, and that was crypto YouTube. Crypto Twitter was starting to come into its own, and you saw a lot of these. I'm never going to refer to them as experts, but people that were there early enough to start to amass a following, but didn't necessarily care or understand about the industry. And they just started, launching random pre-sale token ICOs and offloading them all onto people. And that's like all of your early BitBoy cryptos of the space who vicariously spawned teams that happen to rug the very project that you're resurrecting. So that massive cascade of disingenuous presentation of this space is something that had to be counterbalanced. So I made Viva La Coin initially as an educational channel to just come on, talk about decentralization, talk about traditional markets, the correlations between them, the importance of what we're doing. And it just so happened to coincide with the start or the inception of the Cardano NFT space. So almost by accident, it became a little bit of both, because my two main areas of focus have always been Bitcoin and Cardano. And it's funny now to see everything coming full circle in certain teams like the Fluid token team, or everyone that's over on Ordinals and bridging back and forth. There is a commonality between them where they're both UTXO oriented. It's just Cardano side, it's the extended UTXO model, Bitcoin's UTXO, but the coding And the nature of how everything is constructed is far more similar than all of the account-based models that everyone championed. Oh, we need interoperability. We need to go and connect to all of these centralized payment systems and pseudo CBDCs that are only going to round trip us back into the same system. But that's the narrative that's pushed. So over that time, just got to meet people from all over the world that either believed the same things that I did and saw the same stuff on a technical level or a functional level, and then really spend my time either trying to build the space up or keep everything in perspective, that regardless of whether people are here for fun or they want to be a degen or they're an investor or maybe they're just interested in the education side of things, it is a digital and financial revolution, whether we recognize it as what it is or not. And that's why at the forefront of even today, people are talking about the presidential election and its impact on whether or not crypto will be accepted or denied. It's at the forefront of one of the most contentious periods in electoral history that we've ever had in this country. So I think it's important to just continue to hammer home why we're here, and then learn to adapt and to scale and to build that as we go. And I try and represent that as an individual. I try and represent that with the people I work with. So that's a little brief history of who I am, how I got here. But yeah, there's a lot of nuance behind the scenes, but that's the big picture.
Dude, I absolutely love that. I mean, I think it's first of all, that was incredibly well said. Like all of that was incredibly well said. I also have like severe ADHD, right? And I feel like it's a superpower in a sense, because it allows us to like really dive into certain kinds of information that's interesting to us and learn it quicker and like more thoroughly than a lot of people would, right? But I would say the thing is that oftentimes it forces us to skip around to a lot of things. So we get this big picture by looking at all the pieces, as opposed to some people that can like go from like the top down. We kind of like every part of it and then get deep into it. No, but that was very well said. I was gonna say, like, I feel like, and I felt like you made comments about the presidential election that's upcoming. I felt like January 6th for one. Okay. I feel like that, as well as just, I've talked to a lot of older people that are historians. And one of the things that they always have been saying, or that they have been saying to me, is that they're like, your generation is so upset about all these things. You know, you have many complaints about, the leadership, the structure and stuff that's going on, but like, what are you guys doing about it? Right. And then, so like, I feel like January 6th was a boiling point when something more than did happen should have happened. But like for many, many years now, we've had this kind of like tension boiling up, that like, it's almost like a revolution should have happened by now, but it didn't. Right. And I feel like that like violent revolution is something that like happens historically time and time again whenever we get to sort of this point. But crypto is kind of like the silent revolution. This is like the way that we can subvert the trajectory of the entire world and of governments and everything in a certain extent, to bring us to the place that we want to get to, without having to like directly fight with the system and the people that have been here before. Because if this is a more efficient system, people will naturally adopt it. And I feel like that's kind of where we're at. It's like, we could fight these older gatekeepers, or we could create technology that they're not necessarily going to use or care to understand. And then by the time that it's mass adopted, we're there. Like, what do you think about that? Is that,
So you brought up a couple important things, and for the audience and for everyone else that comes to like my macroeconomic spaces, they already know I'm apolitical, because it doesn't matter who is standing behind the podium. They're both on the same team of the same conglomerate that is the government, which will never at this stage serve or protect or represent the people. That has been long gone, which is why no matter who's in charge, everything collectively gets worse in these K-shaped recoveries where wealth just gets shoved to the top 1%. And whether it be the great financial crisis and all of the unemployment that took away the employment opportunities of my generation, everyone that was going to college when we were going through, all the way up to the pandemic, where trillions of dollars were sucked away from the majority of people and printed and issued to the institutions and the CEOs and all these monolith, like multi-billionaire, multinational companies. You have a problem that cannot be solved from within, because your vote, for as much as people will push back and say that it matters, it doesn't if the person that's representing you isn't the one making the say. And we've lobbied away our own civil liberties and our own privacy and our availability to make decisions over the course of not just like one presidency, one
many.
party, but it's been a multi-decade thing that's been building. And I often allude to January 6th, not as an individual event or one party issue. It is the response of people that are angry because they understand that something is wrong, but they do not know how to express it because they are either uneducated on the matter, or they have been told that it's based on the other party. It's based on this individual, that individual.
That well, there's somebody to fault. It's kind of like the people that say like it's the cabal, you know what I mean? Or like it's like a boogeyman that doesn't exist.
Yeah. And it's always, it's the other side, which is one of the only tools that the government has left at the moment, apart from just shock and awe of their military power, which we already have been using to fight proxy wars, to begin to position to defend the US dollar against the BRICS coalition and everyone else. But you keep the people divided throughout this entire period until the point where you said like a boiling point. That was like a simmer, right? Yeah. It didn't fully blow up.
It never happened. Yeah, it should have, but it didn't.
But part of the problem is we are coming up into an election where everyone has now learned, or at least come to the conclusion of, we cannot trust the results of this election. If not, based on party lines or who gets in, who becomes the president, but it is more so everyone on both sides can agree on one thing, that nobody trusts the government. And if nobody trusts the government, then why are we all going to fight over who we elect to be the conduit for that same government when they're still making the same decisions? It's illogical. It doesn't make sense. It's not going to serve us. And that's why that imaginary glass ceiling that's on top of stuff, whether it be inflation or, people are starting to trade, whether it be traditional markets, options, crypto on the retail side, let's double capital gains. Or, okay, they have a little bit more money. Well,
they have a way out. We got to stop it.
Yeah, like you have to stop it. So a lot of what's been occurring recently leading up to it in our market, everything is kind of intertwined. So when you have our market and the rest of these markets running up to new all-time highs or right around that same level, no one in crypto is currently purchasing Bitcoin, right? Everyone celebrates the spot ETFs, but if you go on like major databases like lookintabitcoin.com, go to active Bitcoin addresses, and they're actually lower than they've been at any point than over the entirety of the last cycle. There's a reason for that, is because we have been ground into dust as a retail population to where we're desperate to make immediate gains to fill the gaps of the pressures of inflationary environments and dog shit jobs markets and all these other things. And the return over time might be there for the hard, valuable, decentralized assets in our space, but people don't have enough to invest, or they don't have enough time to wait. So it becomes a lottery ticket almost. The meme coins, the venture capital tokens, everyone's like, oh, Solana ran super hard. I'm like, yeah, you know what else did? HBAR. Just recently, HBAR popped up. You know why? Because they have insiders that still hold a lot of it that need to exit from the last cycle. And you had all the pressures of FTX and Lunaterra. Now, HBAR is the example to bring it all back, but I'm going to use them as the example. They have a coalition of companies that are on the board that make decisions, that run everything there. And that includes the likes of IBM and Google and these massive tech companies. So
Let
it's
me
not ran by a bunch of, oh,
I was
go
gonna
ahead.
say one quick thing on that. I have a friend that actually works at Dell, and he directly was working with a team from HBAR because they are fully trying to be able to integrate HBAR capabilities into Dell computers. So like it would be completely interoperable, dude. Yeah.
Which is great for them,
Yeah.
but it's not great for anyone else. So in the short term, what do we need to do? We need to find exit liquidity, and the focus isn't there, and the products aren't ready, even if there are products. So you put out an announcement, right? Oh, we're going to partner up with BlackRock and tokenize real world assets. Now, that announcement didn't come from a hack, and it didn't come from some inexperienced team of a grassroots crypto project. It came from a project with a coalition of companies that not only work in tandem with BlackRock throughout this entire industry and their traditional industries, but then it wasn't refuted for 24 hours until you got a 24-hour jump, 100% increase in price, and then they all exited. The same thing with Solana and all these other centralized payment platforms. They need to extract their money. And it's easier to take $100 million and say, we're just going to airdrop people bait, right? We'll get them over, airdrop people money, but we'll extract 10 times that amount. So why wouldn't you just give away free money to take 10 times that amount? They're playing it more so on that front, as opposed to just building out any infrastructure that benefits people over time. Until that CBDC comes, it's going to remain the Wild West. It's going to remain unregulated because they stand to benefit from that. The average retail trader, almost everyone's down horrendously every end of every bear cycle. And then they chase narratives, they chase changes in things. The same way that people would celebrate BlackRock tokenizing $10 trillion worth of assets, or the same way people were excited about Amazon having their own NFT exchange and platform. How does that stand to benefit anyone in this market, right? They already have all the money. They already have every aspect of their industry. We're not replacing anything. We're going to become subject to their products in our industry, which is the same thing that we're currently trying to get away from.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is chaotic, where people are looking at where money's flowing, liquidity, and whatever else. And I get it. People are going to chase those narratives and find what works. And if they make money, that is great. When everything's running up, it's easy to make money. It is very, very difficult to keep it. And a lot of people, cycle over cycle, are unable to capture and protect and insulate that. And that's where I think the value over time is for anyone that is championing this generational wealth and the self-sovereignty of what this industry is supposed to enable.
That's also amazing. So I feel like in a sense that was kind of like a bleak painting, right? Because like that's the reality that I feel and that I see as well. And I think a lot of people that are in this space, like they feel that way. They understand that a lot more than people that are outside of this space. Ironically, we're all excited about coins that have with hat, you know what I mean? And like silly stuff that doesn't make sense, NFTs, that the artwork, the worse that it is sometimes, the more excited people get about it. But that's like in the forefront. That's what people on the outside see. But the true reality is everything that I feel like that you've just stated. What in this space, or like what things about this space, like maybe some projects and things that you feel like are optimistic and exciting, right? So I mean, like,
Yeah.
not necessarily just bullish, but like what are you really optimistic about seeing in this space, like come from it?
I'm glad you asked that, because a lot of the macro stuff, a lot of like the big picture stuff is very dismal, because that is the reality of the situation, or else this market wouldn't exist in the first place. But anything that is working towards the only value proposition in this market, because there's only one, and that's decentralization. Without that value proposition, everything will round trip directly back into traditional finance. So the reason why Bitcoin was my first focus and is still my largest hold, and I don't touch it and I protect it, and Cardano is my day-to-day economic conversation around governance and trying to do this also, is because any chain that is directly working towards decentralization first, with the availability or the ability to then scale and to then address these different aspects, that's what has my focus and attention. And it does not have to occur overnight. It likely won't. As we've seen, everyone's biggest counterpoints are, well, it's been 5 years. There are small, tiny startups that have a core team that communicate face to face, and it takes them 5 years to make a product and to scale a brand, let alone tens of thousands of strangers that are all developing in sync with one another, trying to solve complicated problems as we move towards governance. Those things aren't net negatives. It's just a part of the process. But within it, my main focus, even outside of NFTs, which I participate in on a social and a business structure level, was what parts of cryptocurrency and the internet and anything that's digitized makes sense to have on there. Because there are some things that a lot of people love and that I wish them the absolute best for, like gaming, that when things get incredibly hard in that blank picture of everything, or the dark, dismal outlook, it's going to be difficult for crypto gaming to have $1 trillion flow into it if the majority of people are suffering through a delayed recession and they're maxed out on their credit cards and they're liquidating their positions. Like, the average consumer isn't the people that you interview on this show. The average person has no savings and they're incredibly indebted. And we talk about adoption, and the first thing we do when we bring someone in, like, oh, come on in, is immediately shove them into like rigged PvP shitcoin trading when they don't understand what a policy ID is. All they know is that someone that told them to jump in is up 1,000x. It's not a good way to generate any type of adoption. But if you find ways to provide solutions, I think World Mobile is one of the best examples that I could give of a product that is giving people access to something they did not have access to prior. Because a large cell company, let's say Verizon, they have no incentive to go and build cell towers and things in low-income areas or nations where they're like, how are we going to extract anything out for ourselves? We can't sell them, $2,000 phones. We can't upcharge them unlimited packages. So what's the point? Well, here we can all collectively incentivize and say, well, not only should they have access, but we can all distribute giving them that access and running these air nodes and running the earth nodes and connect people in that way. I think another way to take it is the access to information. And I've been a massive supporter of IGON for years. And it's nice to see that over the last year, they've finally gotten the traction and everyone's excited and they're wondering like, oh, when is it going even higher? That's not the point. Like, they were at 0.2 of a penny in February of last year and nobody cared because we're all looking at the wrong things while trying to chase whatever narratives are out there, when long term, those solutions that are allowing that cloud computing or the storage of documents or privacy or mobile connectivity and communication, digital identity, even like book token, things like that, all very important things for people to access information. And then DeFi, on the other hand, which is more so your lending and borrowing, all of the synthetics platforms, although I believe they're important and there are different aspects of markets that actually allow them to operate, I personally do not spend a lot of time lending and borrowing or utilizing synthetics as an individual because it's highly volatile. If you have the bandwidth and you're not just looking for the extra yield, there are different ways to get your 3%, whether it be from staking or farming, if you understand impermanent loss. When you start getting into multiple pegs of things or tracking the collateral on your loans or synthetic positions, all it takes is one event out of your control and it puts you in a very difficult spot. So I think that they need to have a significant amount of time being operational. We need to have more stability within this market for it to make sense for the average person to begin to familiarize themselves with it.
That's interesting. So, with like in a response to that, my question is, are you I guess bullish or optimistic on AI like vaults, like DeFi essentially that's managed by different risk sector, like different risk parameters using AI in order to like manage that risk on the behalf of the person?
It depends. Like I think it's such a new market sector that just like everyone in 2021 across all chains in crypto said, I understand NFTs. I understand the speculative value. I understand it's up only. We're so early, that type of stuff. I believe both traditionally and in the crypto space, AI is a bubble. I think that although it is applicable and it's going to change a lot of things over time, right now the main impact is objective based work that your developer, your accountant, your lawyer, your order taker, your bookkeeper, whatever they're doing, you replace objective based work that needs no subjectivity, creativity, or personal imagination going into creating a solution. So it's detrimental to the average person that wants to come in and provide a skill that can now be automated. Apart from that, everyone over on the payroll side, which I still work there with small, mid-sized businesses who are getting crushed at the moment because everything's so expensive for them. When you have all of these different things that you can automate, then they're saying in a good way, they're excited saying, well, AI is going to add $10 trillion to the overall market over the next 8 to 10 years. Doesn't that sound great? But if you look at the overall amount of payroll that they're going to be eliminating based on that conversation, it's about 8 to $10 trillion worth of payroll that they're going to start to wean people off of making into just almost centralizing these tech-based, tech-ran companies. And I think with AI, for it to be fully functional and as fast as it's becoming a main point of conversation, you can't have a much further push in AI where it's replacing all these different things that people do, whether they be the managers running a fund or someone else contributing something objective based, without having a conversation around either a universal basic income or something that begins to replace that value system for anyone that no longer has a place for their skill set. And it almost reverses the conversation around the valuation of education and how much people are paying for secondary education, where you come out of school and you have a bunch of knowledge on something that someone with a phone can look up a global database on every case or every structure or every regulation or compliance measure that has ever existed in real time. Then what does it matter if you're a certified, SHRM HR manager? What does it matter if you got your law degree from so-and-so? Inevitably, because these systems are getting incredibly good, incredibly fast. It's tough. I would say that's one, just like with crypto, because 99% of this market is also either disingenuous or self-serving or not really leading anywhere. People should be incredibly cautious on the long-term outlook of how they can benefit from it, or if they're going to invest in it, understand the value proposition of it, and just don't get burned in like the initial hype. Or if you're taking advantage of it and saying like, this is the initial hype, I'm in and out, then just time it right. But that's like my initial outlook on the whole thing.
Interesting. So now you've touched on DAOs, right? And then so like we talked a little bit about Jpg Empire and how at the end of the prior, I guess, I don't know, at the end of the beginning, it became a DAO, right? The thing with our DAO is it didn't have any DAO tooling. There was not any real DAO infrastructure. You got, a handful of people setting up proposals with no intention to do anything about any of the proposals that were proposed, right? You are a very heavily ingrained part of Omen, right? And Omen is either already a DAO or intending to become a DAO. Where would you place it?
So we've had our DAO in Pneumonium, which was the parent company in the inception of all of this that has led to Omen, which was kind of a reverse build. And I can go into that for you. But we had a DAO spanning back to Q1 of 2022.
Oh, that's
Um, and around that time, if there was a YouTuber, he still puts out a lot of great content. If you've ever met with him or spoke with him, Jay Crypto. But he did a series around DAOs, and it was about 12 videos, and it was just called the DAO Off. And it was like the early iterations of a DAO before they spun off and became Summon. Cardman was on from the Ape Society super early on, and then a bunch of other DAOs that didn't really materialize, but trying to figure out how to structure these so they work. And for me, even being in crypto back in 16, 17, 18, I never touched NFTs. They just didn't make sense to me at the time. That wasn't where my focus was. But it all kind of clicked at the start of 2021 when you have all that movement around the art that Beeple was making and Bored Ape Yacht Club and this and that. But the idea of a DAO or a decentralized autonomous organization, it is a different type of business structure where now not only could I have stake within a company, but I can actively participate as a shareholder to make decisions without needing to be a member of the board, without needing to be the chairman, without needing to be a certain percentage holder of a stock. You start to make collective decisions. And it reminded me a lot around what Cardano was and still is working towards over the course of this year in Voltaire and full governance distribution. That type of governance within these businesses and how you raise capital and build yourself up was something that was incredibly interesting to me, because I figured if you do it correctly, then it could become self-sustaining regardless of how volatile these markets become. You just have to be able to get to the point where you not only have the structure, but you also have the participation. And the structure part, even after you took over JPEG Empire, the structure, you set up all the wallets and you get everyone in order and you explain what you're doing. It's a little bit easier than actually fostering participation. And we've seen the same thing when it comes to people doing their temp checks around SIP 1694, or their temp checks around governance and intersect. It's very hard to mobilize people to participate in group decision making. And it's even more difficult to do it when there's any type of long-term investment or value proposition that people come together and collectively make those decisions on. So when we launched our DAO back in Ammonium, we had overall about 30 proposals. And we finished to the point where between now and when the sub-DAOs and Omen go live, we'll liquidate all of that. Anyone that had one of those original DAO pieces, they'll be able to liquidate it, get their share out of it. But it was up about 300%, which doesn't seem like a lot when you have people posting, their 10,000x lottery tickets. But in reality, when you're making group decisions and you need to be on top of the market and there's more responsibility and transparency involved in that as a collective, it's a difficult thing to do. So we had our proof of concept and did that there. So now over on the Omen side, we'll have kind of a bifurcated utility where the one side is 100% of royalties in perpetuity will be distributed to stakers on our Anvil platform that they built out. And then the other side, if they're on the women's side, they'll be able to participate within the DAO and the decision-making, which we're going to preemptively fund before any of that goes live. So trying to give a little bit of liquidity, a little bit of an advantage, and then some expertise across not just myself and not just Nemo, but the collective of people that have different skill sets, different opportunity horizons, different things that they're looking at. It just allows you to have a better pulse on where opportunity might be and what that timeline looks like. But yeah, I really think that DAOs, if done correctly, they can be a powerful tool for the good of a project, it just takes a lot of time. And it's
Yeah.
been about close. We're coming up on 3 years now since the start of Pneumonium and where we came to. So if that gives any idea to people out there, that you mentioned before we went live, a couple projects that have good ideas or really good art, they're still trying to mint out, and the struggle is real at certain points. It doesn't all just snap into place overnight. The market fit doesn't just occur overnight. Those communities and the cultures and what you're trying to represent and scale out doesn't happen quickly. But if you stick with it and you have an idea of what you want to do, Omen and how it's constructed now and how it was going, that was on our vision board in Nemo's head years ago. So it's interesting now to look backwards at it to see everything play out.
No, that's awesome. So, yeah, currently, JPEG Empire is no longer a DAO. We don't even, like, we say it's a community project because we do use a lot of community feedback and input. But basically, where it was whenever we came into it with all the proposals with no direction to go, we had a community vote and asked for like centralized control, because we were basically like, we cannot be getting everybody's approval every time we need to hire a dev, every time we need to, like, when we had to start an LLC, when we had to do all these different things, pay people and stuff, we could not wait for consensus at the place that we were at the beginning. So our ultimate goal is definitely to get to that DAO level where there is like dispersed and delegated responsibilities across the whole network of the community. That way we can move forward that way. However, currently we're not, but I think it's definitely right now for the interim, it's for the better. But the DAO setup is our long-term goal for sure.
Love it.
So Omen is an amazing project though. A lot of us are holders. We were really excited about it. The art's amazing. You already know that. I mean, like, the whole vision and everything that you all are doing over there is amazing. So what is your particular like role, or because I had talked to Nemo and I was like, Nemo, come on, I'm trying to get you up here. He was like, no, dude, I don't do that stuff. He was like, maybe like, later when I do a live interview, then I'll come on. But I was like, yeah, we'll have Viva up here. We'll have a great time. I've heard you speak in a bunch of different spaces. I mean, I think you're really good with your words and just really have a good vision, right? But so tell me a little bit about yourself and Omen. Like, you've been there from the beginning, but
Yep. And I was there from the beginning of Pneumonium. So this whole multi-year stint, I was there back then. And the first in-depth conversation Nemo and I ever had, it wasn't about the outlook and what is the roadmap for Pneumonium or what we want to do. It was about, why are you here? What is important? What sticking points do you see? What incorrect thinking does the space have, and what can we address? And does it matter to us on a core level? And I think us being able to connect and to understand that not just the vision of what we wanted to build out and make a real culture, not just a community, and not lean on the buzzwords of a DAO, but actually make it function. It was something that I became a part of because I believed and still believe in that vision. And my title wasn't like a co-founder. It wasn't, I'm coming on to be a community manager or anything like that. I was never really given a direct title. So I always joke about it and say, oh, I'm the words guy. But the way that Nemo wanted to structure it was, we're both very old school crypto minded thinkers. Because he's been in this market a long time too. So sometimes being front and center when you're trying to build something out can be counterintuitive. And on his side, even when we talk about like Bitcoin or anything else, like having a little anonymity and allowing the community to breathe, right? You can't have a project Pneumonium and then have Nemo on camera in the middle of it, just like, yes, everyone come over here. It was able to focus more so on the people and not on himself. But in order to do that, you have to be able to communicate things to everyone else and communicate things vicariously back and have those conversations and be able to foster the partnerships. So that was the role that I took on early with Nemo. And we always joke about our early relationship, even with Ada Anvil, because before they were even Ada Anvil, I was working with them. They were helping me do a charity event. It was the only project I ever personally launched. And it was just a charity meant to pay for someone that had an organ transplant in our community. But they were doing the development and helping me mint that out to raise the funds. And after that was done, I was like, these guys, they're really, really good. And at first Nemo was joking. He's like, oh, they're scammers or whatever else, because, you're just getting to know everyone in the space. He knew Cash. So we all jumped on a call. And it turns out they were actually formulating a development agency, and that became Ada Anvil. So some of the other people I was mentioning, their core team, but he was like, I haven't seen that person or this or that. And from that day, we've had a phenomenal partnership. And we've piloted things even in pneumonium prior to Omen that people probably are unaware of. So like, aside from my charity mint, which was the first ever tester of it, our Calvaria pneumonium collection was the first ever mobily minted NFT. So that was back on Eternal, right when dApps became live in the middle of 2022. We piloted their affiliate links, their new non-custodial staking platform that people still use to this day. We were like, we'll be the crash test dummy, you be the developers, and let's see how far we can push this chain to try and make something that sticks and that's important and that's different, that isn't just carbon copying the things that exist. And they've been phenomenal. But like relationships and little things like that come into fruition, not because they were planned, but just because as a part of this, trying to think proactively of how can we build these relationships and partner up with people that I believe are here for the right reasons, that I also believe are the best in our entire ecosystem. How can we solidify those relationships and vicariously attempt to benefit each other? So that's been a lot of my role there. And I've been everything from the space runner to the video guy that's meeting with everyone, to putting out announcements, to just basic conversations. But a lot of people in the community have stepped up phenomenally and do incredible things within Omen, and have done them all the way back with pneumonium. So it's not just a one or a two or a 3-person effort. It becomes the entire community mobilizing. And I think that you can feel the reverberations of that when a 10K collection that is in the depths of the bear market, when NFTs are dead, nobody even cared or heard about pneumonium for the most part, all of a sudden, with, of course, the PHTR system and some ingenious ideas from Nemo and the efforts from Anvil and the phenomenal art from Victor. But it is possible when you get everyone together under that single idea of here's what we want to do, here's the quality that we want to produce it at, and then here are all the people that are involved that want to see it to fruition. It's a very, very powerful thing in a space where attention and focus and actual authentic buy-in to things because you believe in them or you find them valuable is very, very fleeting. You want to create something that matters, that people want to stick around and participate within.
That's so well said. And I love that. So here's a question you may or may not know the answer to. You also, if at any point I ask something that you don't want, I can get rid of it. But so like, do you know how much is in the treasury of Omen? Like, do you have an idea, or of pneumonium?
So right then, I would say if I prepared that, I could give it to you. We just went through over the last 48 hours, the unstaking, well, technically since last Friday, the unstaking of the remainder of the PHTR rewards. We were distributing a bunch of Skull token and a bunch of the other Omens and Clay token and Snail out. So if I give an answer, it's probably going to be incorrect. But I know before everything goes live, all of those pieces are going to be updated. Plus our wallets are on the Discord. So if anyone wants to go and look into it, they're all posted up there.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say because yeah, we've been thinking about this pretty huge infrastructural investment that we're likely going to be making, and yeah, I was talking to somebody else over on the Angels team, and they were like, yeah, the only way that anybody is going to have buy-in to that is if there's an equity split. And so I was thinking, if it's a DAO and that's kind of how you all work and like things to happen, then perhaps we can all invest in the further build out and infrastructure of Cardano in a way that may be mutually profitable and beneficial for everybody involved. To the
Yep.
end goal being, decentralization, privacy, and all that.
Yep. And there's there's certain aspects that I'm also humble enough to understand that I am not the expert in. And that's around the back end development because I don't code, and the legal side. So over the course of last month, where Nemo was traveling and meeting with them in this month, we brought on Genius Yield and Genius X as an advisor to go through the whole tokenomics and breakdown because we have to revamp Skull Token into Omni, as well as a couple different legal advisors and teams that were paid upfront in order to make sure that's all sound and to the best of our ability is to the information that's out, the parameters that are out legally in the clear. But it's a lot, especially in a space where we are stubbornly refusing to define how to structure these companies or how to do things in a way that meets a traditional standard that is in itself corrupt, while also trying to pay for everything and to keep everyone in the loop. It's a very, very interesting balance. And probably whenever Nemo does start doing his videos and he'll come on, that's where his part of the weeds start to extend.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, that's kind of like where we're now thinking about this. Like we've gotten into this, we've gotten this far. We know that everything that we've done so far is like, as to the book as it can be. But now, as we start going forward into this even deeper endeavor, that's where like the first thing that was said on our team call is like, we need somebody that knows everything so that they can just make sure that we're doing everything right. And it's kind of like one of the sad and kind of like the funny and beautiful things about this space. Like people say, it's the wild, wild west, but like it's only when you're trying to push the boundaries far enough to do something that might actually have significant value that then you run into the forces that be, until you run into that opposition. And then so it's like, if you're in this space, you either want to go, I mean, like, you might as well shoot for mass adoption and disruption of the entire system. You know what I mean? That's why we came in here. But if you do that, that's where, it gets tough. It gets tough.
Yeah. And it definitely, the bigger you get or the more people that are involved or the more money that's moving, it I hate the term like puts a target on you, but it absolutely says, okay, maybe if we're going to go back and retroactively begin to audit this space, they're going to look at the top 10 projects on Ethereum and they're going to go top down. And some of them have already been in their own legal battles, like Yuga Labs or some of these big exchanges, the large money movers. Some of the larger tokens like Uniswap right now is starting their battle with the SEC, and it will trickle down. And a lot of blockchains benefit for anyone that is either unaware, uneducated, or doesn't have someone that they've hired with the expertise. All of that is tracked and on chain. So inevitably, if you go back and you audit that, like it's just going to create a minefield for anyone, especially if when they do define this, they start moving the parameters and moving the goalposts to be disadvantageous for anyone that's already worked here.
Well, you look at
Um,
CZ, right? CZ 4 months is what he ended up getting. That's because he was rich enough to pay, I think it was $51 billion. But had he not had any money for them, had he lost his ledger in a boating accident, as we all have, you know, um, he would have had a hard time. And I mean, like what they were giving him is like, I think that ultimately what they settled on was like money laundering, right? And it's not even really money laundering. It's just international, like peer-to-peer transactions, or sending cash without permission, even if it's digitally, even if both parties are in agreement that this is what they're doing. They always say that that's money laundering, even though, like, really, like, dude, it's my ledger and I transferred it to another ledger, you know what I mean? Or I controlled it while I was in one country, it's crazy. But I always
And there's not a single thing that they're going to pin him with, or anyone else in this space, that people in traditional finance with US dollars don't do it in order of magnitude higher amounts than is done in crypto. It's just asinine to assume that just because it's digital in a way that is actually more auditable and more trackable and more transparent, all of a sudden that makes it more criminal, when in reality the US dollar is the majority of it comparatively.
Yeah. To anybody that's watching us right now, the last time you went to purchase cocaine, now you tell me which crypto your drug dealer accepted, right? Anyways, no, jokes. But it's barbaric. They say that it's all only used for bad things, but, like, the majority of people out here in the world are not even educated on crypto enough to even, like, accept it as payment. So I mean, it's barbaric to think that the majority of things that are not forthright or that are illicit all happen with magic internet money.
True.
I mean,
One thing on that point before we change gears, to tie it back to our initial conversation around political theater or expectations of regulatory parameters that will come out of who is elected. One thing that everyone needs to understand is, when you're looking at this market, everyone's pricing these assets in US dollars, which, although it is the world reserve currency that's currently falling to the wayside, is BRICS, which, for anyone unfamiliar, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, now Iran, Saudi Arabia, many oil producing countries, they're
Venezuela.
all aiming to de-dollarize and to get away from that. And they've already been actively trading hundreds of billions of dollars amongst themselves. But people view this market and they say, we have everything right now to lose. Like, we have to just shill our stuff and we got to pump it up. We need the liquidity. We're the ones with everything to lose. Where in reality, the government and these agencies and every unelected bureaucrat, they're actually on the side that has everything to lose. They have the world reserve status. They have this bloated wealth that they've siphoned all up to themselves. They have OPEC and the US dollar being the underpinning currency to trade oil globally for decades. They have control over your sovereignty and your privacy and your ability to transact, which only tightens up with the CBDC. They stand to lose everything. There's not a single gain that they could get by participating in this network, by enabling this network, by defining it, by having their ETF. There's not a single thing that benefits them. You think them having an ETF where $12 billion were put in while BlackRock's managing $10 trillion worth of assets that are at risk of being repriced in currencies that are not the US dollar, that they stand to benefit from that? Absolutely not, especially if it enables my ability as an individual to circumvent them as intermediaries. So they're going to do everything in their power to avoid allowing self-custody, to avoid the on and the off ramps, and they want everything housed within institutional control, even if they are those chains and ledgers. Because at that same time, we mentioned like the VC tokens and the extraction of liquidity. At the same time, they're going back and they purchased all the spot Bitcoin this year. Average Bitcoin wallet addresses are declining in activity. They purchased all the spot Bitcoin. They bought all the shares of Marathon and Hut 8 and all these mining
And didn't they
companies.
buy MicroStrategy or something like that too, or the MicroStrategy became a subsidiary? I feel like I remember reading something or somebody saying that that was their plan, is like MicroStrategy keeps accumulating, and then like that might be
So
another avenue for.
So they own a fair amount of MicroStrategy stock. The same with almost every media company, every mining company, but we're giving up the value proposition of our economy or the value proposition of decentralization. We'll let them buy all the Bitcoin and buy all the miners because we're too busy trolling and sifting for our lottery ticket to get out of this rat race and make fiat currency and put it back in your bank, put it back in a Silicon Valley bank because that blew up, or put it into the bank that bought Signature Bank's assets, New York
And I
Community
think
Bank,
it
because
was
that
like
blew up.
First Republic or something like that recently, like had to get taken over by the FDIC after it already did before. It's happened again. And the yen is now like done for, right? Isn't it? And then, yeah, it's exciting.
But
Exciting.
but it was just to tie it back into when we're looking at the rationale or reasoning behind the political theater and the moves that they're making, what they're purchasing. Retail, whether it be the external individuals that are already struggling with the narratives and the split politics and the cost of living and inflation, we're also being fed the narratives about where the money is and how great the opportunity is and all these different places. Well, they're buying none of it, and they're purchasing all of the value proposition oriented assets out from underneath us, and nobody seems to care at all that's occurring, or that could threaten our ability to access it or self-custody it or be able to have any participation.
I feel like we're here for the right reasons. A lot of people, they get in for the quick money and then they end up staying for the revolution, right? That's what they always say now. But I guess 5 years down the line, where do you think that we're going to be at in this space? Do you think that we're going to be, I personally think mass adoption is like 8 years away. But in like 4 or 5 years, do you think, like, what do you see this space becoming? Do you see it getting bigger or staying the same? Or
So it's an interesting question because you have a couple different things that are happening at once. The term that I use for it is it's a poly crisis, right? So your typical crisis that occurs is when something astronomical uproots a certain way of life, a certain expectation of the infrastructure that you participate in. But if you have multiple crises occur at the same time, polycrisis. So everyone kind of shuts down, and their ability to absorb that amount of stress is an individual, or sometimes even the systems. But you had the entire shutdown of the world and the congestion of the global supply chain. You currently have 3 proxy wars that the U.S. is funding. And the last one we just passed in this last bill, we're preemptively funding with Taiwan, which is the mecca of chip production for this entire AI revolution that everyone's excited for, that has been in the scope of essentially the leader of the BRICS nations right across the South Pacific Ocean. And like that's occurring. You also have absolute political theater and a breakdown and borderline radicalization of half of the country versus half of the country. You could push it to inflationary measures or the amount of interest that we're now paying on a national debt, immigration, a litany of things that actually threaten the way of life for people from multiple angles. Cryptocurrency adoption will not come from marketing. It will come from necessity. The same reason why this market was created to begin with was in response to the trillions of dollars of wealth that were stolen from people in the great financial crisis and the housing collapse. That is why Bitcoin exists. It was a measure to protect and insulate the people. So first, in order for us to have any type of mass adoption, we need to do a couple things. One, recognize that crypto is not the United States. It may be predominantly how it is tracked currency-wise because the dollar is the world reserve currency, but it is not cryptocurrency in and of itself. So our regulatory measures, the same way that we weaponize currency against other nations at the current moment, or even our own population at the current moment, we have to separate ourselves from pricing things in dollars, because the moment you're back into dollars, you now become subject to however they're going to rectify this situation or reset it or institute some type of CBDC or social credit system, however they intend to do it. So you have to recognize that assets that you hold that are finite, that I can trade for anyone for a representation of value, are valuable because of what they are, not because of what they're priced in this failing currency that predicated the creation of this market. The second thing is that everyone across the world that isn't at that elite level making these decisions are all on the same team. Meeting people from all over the world, probably in your community, you people in how many different countries, right?
Mhm.
And everyone bleeds the same. Everyone is amicable with one another. And it is the socio-political agenda or narratives that tends to drive people apart, to drive populations and ideologies apart, when really we've gotten to the point between communication and technologies such as cryptocurrency or the internet prior to it, and being able to speak to individuals that I'm like, hey, you don't hate me and I don't hate you. We both hate our respective corrupt governments,
Yeah.
and yet we're both utilizing the same network to counterbalance that, to champion the networks that we collectively use. It then becomes more powerful than any one population of one nation versus one government within that nation. It becomes a global population adopting something out of necessity to say, you have priced us out of every asset or form of equity in the current structure of things. We refuse to inherit this system of debt that will never benefit us and subsequently will collapse in on us. And we are going to reprice and restructure and rebuild this system from the ground up on our own together and distribute it. Of course, there's going to be more equity and opportunity depending on people's money that they put in, or how people enter or transfer, where they're at in the world, their monetary literacy, financial literacy, but they can participate and have access. Where in many banks, in many institutions, you need X amount of money just to open up an account. You need X amount of equity to be able to make a decision. If I don't even hold X amount of financial assets under management, then I can't make decisions for other people, because that is the parameter that's put in place. Even if the decisions that a traditional financial advisor they might be making for an individual no longer serves them and hasn't, it's trying to separate our thinking as to why this space exists. Without that, global adoption cannot occur. And I believe the only way that people will be able to shrink their world a bit and to say, okay, it doesn't matter about US dollars. It doesn't matter if I can't protect it. What is this space for? That comes out of necessity. And oftentimes necessity, like the old revolutions that have occurred dozens of times over history, is the let them eat cake moment. And as that builds momentum, and as the general consensus gets to the full boiling point, then there is no way to stop that global adoption curve from skyrocketing, unless you pigeonhole everyone into a system where they cannot exit. If I have a CBDC and I go to a cryptocurrency exchange and I want to buy something, well, I can't. I have to purchase it through Goldman Sachs or Fidelity. If I want to move my money myself, I can't, because it is fully programmable and it no longer serves me. It serves the same people that didn't serve me to begin with. Addressing those types of things lead us to adoption. And there's only a handful of places in the crypto space that put that priority first. And that's where my focus is. And if it takes another 8 years, so be it. But I refuse to round trip this and be like everyone else that came here for the money, to just buy a bunch of stuff and then have your Lamborghini repoed and develop a drug problem and become an attention endorphin overstimulated psychopath, because no one knows what to do with that money. No one came in here with those intentions of, what do you want to be, like a socialite? Like it has to be something collective that means what it was intended to.
100%.
And yeah, it's one of those things where I spend so much time in this space and talking about it. Like any person I film with, or like I've gone on multiple times with them, it always winds up like, unless someone pulls the plugs, it just goes for 2.5 hours and gets drawn out. But I think it's important. And I think people like yourself or anyone else that wants to make videos that aren't just like, by all means, I could come on and grab my laptop and be like, everyone go buy Omen and put your shit through the portal. It's different than that. Like, it's what are the principles of why we're here, and then everything that we build outside of that is mirroring what we want to see in the space. Like, there's, if you want change, then be the change you want to see. And it's so nauseatingly cliche, but it's the truth. And we can't expect better from the space or from other creators or from founders or from capital firms or traditional finance. If we come in with the full ability to attempt to build something better and then just recreate the same predatory systems or nonsensical loops that we've had in the past, instead of trying to do something different, like we would all be hypocrites.
100%. 100%. So we're going to wrap this up now. This was fantastic. Like, I think just there's so much information there. I love, like, this is my favorite part about this space, because like I'm trying to build something that I feel like is valuable. I'm trying to get to that place where like my long-term goal is tackling like health, like a part, like some of the problems in healthcare, as well as medical information. And then so that's going to be like a huge adventure. But from where I am now to getting there, I think we've got a ways to go. But I'm super excited about anybody in this space that is building the same kind of value. Like, we're all trying to disrupt the status quo and fix the problems that nobody else seems to be fixing. I mean, we have these people there that are supposed to fix them, but they are intentionally not fixing these problems because it benefits them to not. If it benefits somebody's career, life trajectory, and their job to not know information, or to like be oblivious or unaware to certain information, then they will always be oblivious or unaware of certain information. But this has been a super good talk.